The doctor leaned forward, kind and careful, and asked me what year it was. I told him. I told him the month, the day, the name of the sitting governor, and the breakfast I had eaten 2 hours earlier. Then I asked him why he was looking at me like a woman who might not know. He glanced down at the folder in his hands. "Your son said you've been confused for a few months now," he said gently. "Forgetting appointments. Leaving the stove on. Getting lost on familiar roads." I sat very still. I had spent 41 years as a pediatric nurse. I knew how to keep my face calm while my mind went cold and fast underneath it. Because none of that was true. Not one word. I had not been lost. I had not left the stove on. And I had certainly never told my son I was afraid of my own mind. So why was Daniel telling a doctor that I was losing it? My name is Margaret Dale. Everyone calls me Maggie. I am 68 years old, and I live alone in the house my husband Tom and I built in 1986, with our own hands and a loan we paid off the year he retired. Tom passed 3 winters ago. The house is paid for. His pension still comes to me every month, the survivor's portion, the way he set it up so I would never have to worry. I have my savings. I have my routine. I have my garden and my friend Ruth next door and a granddaughter named Casey who used to call me every Sunday. I tell you all of that so you understand, I was not a frightened old woman. I was a careful one. And careful women notice things. It started small. The kind of small you talk yourself out of. My pill organizer was wrong one morning. I fill it every Sunday night, 7 days. 4 compartments each. That Tuesday, Wednesday's pills were sitting in Monday's slot. I have filled that organizer the same way for 9 years. I told myself I'd been distracted. But I hadn't been. Then there was the appointment I supposedly missed. The dentist called to reschedule a cleaning I never booked, on a day I was never told about. When I said I had no such appointment, the receptionist said, "Your son set it up for you, hon. He asked us to call him too, in case you forgot." In case I forgot. The phrase stuck to me like a burr. A week later, at Sunday dinner at Daniel's house, my daughter-in-law Vanessa laid her hand on my arm in front of everyone and said, so warmly, "Maggie, don't worry about the dishes. You've had a lot of moments lately." A few of the cousins looked down at their plates. Daniel didn't look at me at all. That was the night I stopped talking myself out of it. These were not my mistakes. Someone was making them look like mine. I am not a dramatic person, so I did the unglamorous thing. I started checking. Daniel had told that doctor I left the stove on. My stove has an automatic shut-off. Tom installed it the year his own mother got forgetful. A safety feature that clicks off after an hour. It is physically incapable of being left on, the way Daniel described. Daniel had also told relatives I forgot to pay the water bill. I went to my desk, pulled the statement, and there it was, paid, on time, with a confirmation number I had written in the margin in my own hand, the way I write everything down. One lie I could disprove with a piece of paper. And if I could prove that one was false, I could prove the rest were too. I just had to stop reacting and start collecting. Daniel had also told the doctor I'd gotten lost on familiar roads. That one was almost insulting. I have driven the same 6 miles to the same grocery store since the Reagan administration. But I didn't argue with the air. I drove to the bank instead and pulled 3 months of debit records. My card had been used at that same grocery store, that same gas station, that same pharmacy, every week, like clockwork, in a pattern so ordinary it could have been printed on a calendar. A woman who keeps getting lost does not buy the same brand of oatmeal every Thursday morning at the same store. The record of a boring, steady life, it turns out, is also the record of a sound mind. So I became a nurse again. When you chart a patient, you write down what happened, when it happened, and what you observed, without emotion, so that later no one can argue with the record. I started doing that with my own life. I bought a fresh notebook. I dated every entry. And I learned, at 68, to use the voice recorder on my phone. Casey had shown me once, a long time ago, and it came back to me faster than I expected. From then on, when family came over, I pressed record before I opened the door. Not to trap anyone. To remember. To have a record that did not depend on whose word a doctor decided to believe. I also started reading my own bank statements the way I once read lab results, line by line, looking for the thing that did not belong. And I found it. A few weeks earlier, someone had called the bank and tried to add a second name to my checking account. The bank had refused, thank God, because Tom and I had set it up long ago to require my signature, in person, for any change. But the note in my file recorded the date, the time, and the caller, a man who said he was just helping his mother get organized. I had never asked anyone to organize me. I had spent my whole life organizing other people. The first thing the record caught was the mailbox. My mail had been thinning out for weeks. Fewer statements, no pension notice, none of the little envelopes that mark an ordinary life. I assumed the post office was slow. Then one afternoon I opened the box and a yellow forwarding slip was caught in the back of it, half torn. A change of address confirmation. My address, crossed through. Forwarded to Daniel's house. In handwriting that was not mine. I stood at the end of my own driveway and felt the ground tilt, just slightly, the way it does right before you understand something you cannot ununderstand. I drove to a copy shop 2 towns over, not the one near my house, and I made copies of everything before I did anything else. The nurse in me knew, protect the chart first. Then I went to the post office and quietly had my mail restored to me, with a note in my file that no one but me could change it. That was how the law office letter finally reached my hands instead of his. It was addressed to Daniel, but it concerned me. It referenced an upcoming capacity assessment, and the filing of a petition for conservatorship over the person and estate of Margaret Dale. I had to read the word 3 times. Conservatorship. It meant a court could decide I was unfit to manage my own life, and could hand that authority, my home, my money, Tom's pension, my medical decisions, to someone else. To my son. This was not a man overreacting to his mother getting older. This was a plan with a paper trail and a law firm and a date. And then the pressure started in earnest, because I think he could feel me slipping out of the story he was writing. Daniel began coming by more, but it was never really visiting. It was managing. Mom, why don't you move in with us, just till we get you sorted out? Let me put your accounts under my name so you don't have to deal with all the paperwork. Vanessa started calling Ruth a bad influence, said Ruth was confusing me, suggested maybe I shouldn't have people over when I was having a hard stretch. They were trimming away the people who might notice I was fine. I saw it happen with my own eyes one afternoon. Ruth came up my walk with a plate of her lemon bars, the way she had 100 times, and Vanessa met her on the porch before she reached the door. I could not hear all of it through the screen, but I heard enough. It's really not a good day for her. She gets overwhelmed with visitors now. We're just trying to keep things calm. Ruth, bless her, smiled and said she would leave the lemon bars and that she would be right next door whenever Maggie wanted her. Then she looked past Vanessa, straight through the screen, straight at me, and gave me one small nod. She knew. That nod kept me standing for a week. One evening Daniel stood in my kitchen, the kitchen Tom built, and said, very softly, Mom, I'm trying to protect you. If you fight me on this, it's only going to look worse for you. And I understood then that it was not really about whether I was confused. It was about making sure that whatever I said next could be called confusion. He wanted my money. But first he needed to take my voice. A week later the petition was real. A doctor's letter was attached to it, a physician I had met exactly once, for 15 minutes, who had written that I showed signs consistent with cognitive decline. A court date was set for the end of the month. I had a little over 3 weeks to prove that I was, in fact, myself. Most people, I think, would have panicked. I had spent my career staying calm in rooms where panic could kill someone. So I made a list, the way I would for a patient in crisis, and I worked the list. First, the recordings. By then I had weeks of them. I had a recording of Vanessa, sweet as pie, coaching me at the dinner table. Just tell the doctor you get mixed up sometimes, Maggie, it'll be easier for everyone. I had Daniel on tape saying, we just need you to agree that you can't handle things on your own anymore. I had myself on those same recordings, answering questions clearly, remembering names, dates, the price of tomatoes, the year my husband died. Hours of an ordinary, lucid woman being told, patiently, that she was not one. Then there was the call I was never meant to hear. Daniel had stepped onto my back porch to take a phone call, thinking I was upstairs. I was not upstairs. I was in the laundry room with the window cracked, and my phone in my apron pocket, already recording, because by then it always was. I will not pretend I felt clever. I felt sick. Because what I heard him say was this, that the business was underwater, that he was 3 months from losing the house, and that the conservatorship was the only way to get to Mom's money before it's all tied up. He said, once I'm conservator, the house sells and that solves everything. The house. Tom's house. The walls we painted. He was going to sell the walls we painted. I sat down on the cold tile floor of my own laundry room and I let myself cry for exactly 2 minutes, because grief deserves that much. Then I stood up, because I had a court date, and crying does not win court dates. The last thing on my list was the one that mattered most. If a doctor's letter said I was declining, I would get my own. I called the largest hospital in the city, the one with no connection to my family, and I scheduled a full, independent neurological and cognitive evaluation. I paid for it myself. I told them everything, the petition, the claims, all of it, and asked them to test me honestly and write down exactly what they found. I sat through 3 hours of memory tasks and puzzles and questions. A week later the results came back in plain language, no evidence of cognitive impairment. Memory, reasoning, and judgment all within normal range for my age, in several places above it. The neurologist added a line I have read more times than I can count: patient is fully capable of managing her own affairs and medical decisions. I asked Ruth to come with me to the hearing. She had known me for 30 years. She had watched me chart my own grandchildren's growth charts on her kitchen wall. When I told her everything, she did not gasp or perform. She just took my hand and said, "Maggie, I have watched you alphabetize a spice rack. You tell that judge to call me." She would be my witness. Before the hearing, I did one more thing. I went to see Daniel alone. I owed myself that, and maybe I owed him the chance, even though he had not offered me one. I sat in his living room and I told him plainly that I knew. About the mail. About the letter. About the call on the porch. I did not raise my voice. I have learned that the truth is loudest when it is quiet. He did what frightened people do. First he denied it. "Mom, you're not understanding this." Then he deflected. "Vanessa handled the mail thing, that wasn't me." Then, finally, he reached for the cruelest version of the lie, the one he'd built the whole plan on. "You are getting older, Mom. Maybe you don't realize how much you've slipped. I'm doing this because I love you." And there it was. He had said it so many times he had almost made himself believe it. That love and control are the same thing if you say them in the same gentle voice. I stood up and I picked up my purse. At the door I turned around. Daniel, I said, I have an evaluation that says I'm fine, and I have a recording of you on my porch explaining exactly why you need me not to be. So if you'd like, we can both stop pretending. Or you can let the court decide which one of us is confused. He didn't follow me out. I think that was the moment he understood that the careful woman he'd been counting on to fold had been taking notes the whole time. The hearing was smaller than I'd imagined. A plain room. A tired judge. Daniel's lawyer, polished and certain, who described a devoted son worried sick about his declining mother. He made me sound like a fragile thing. I sat with my folder in my lap and I let him finish, because the record was on my side and the record does not need to interrupt. When it was my turn, my attorney, an elder law attorney I had found myself, in the phone book, like the old days, laid it out simply. She entered my independent evaluation into the record, no impairment, fully capable. She entered my mail forwarding documentation, the change of address I never signed. And then she played 2 short recordings. Vanessa coaching me to tell the doctor I was confused. And Daniel, on the porch, explaining that the conservatorship was how he would reach my money before he lost his house. The room went very quiet. I watched my son look at the floor. The judge asked the physician who wrote the original letter how long he had examined me. The honest answer, 15 minutes, did not sound good out loud, especially next to a 3-hour evaluation from a hospital with nothing to gain. Ruth testified. She told the judge I had organized the neighborhood emergency phone tree 2 months earlier and that half the street, herself included, would be lost without me. I saw the corner of the judge's mouth move, almost a smile. The petition was dismissed. The judge said, on the record, that he found no evidence whatsoever that I lacked capacity, and that he had serious concerns about the circumstances under which this petition was brought. He referred the matter of the 15-minute letter to the medical board. He did not have to say the rest. Everyone in that room understood what had almost happened, and who had almost done it. I did not feel triumphant. People expect you to feel triumphant. I felt tired, and I felt sad in a deep, settled way, like the ache after a long fever breaks. What I remember most is not the gavel. It is the way Daniel kept his eyes on the table the whole time the recording played, as if he could not stand to watch his own voice fill the room. I had spent 3 weeks afraid that no one would believe me. In the end, the proof was so plain that winning was not the hard part. The hard part was knowing my own son had made me build a case against him to keep what was already mine. In the weeks after, I did the unglamorous work again. I revoked every authority I had ever signed for Daniel. There had been a power of attorney from years ago, back when I trusted easily, and I had it formally cancelled. I moved my accounts to a credit union where the tellers know my face. I made sure Tom's pension came only to me, locked behind a password Daniel would never guess and a security question only I would answer. I had the locks changed, not out of fear, but out of clarity. Daniel and I do not speak much now. He sent one message, weeks later, that said only, "I'm sorry it went the way it did." Not, "I'm sorry I did it." There is a difference, and I have lived long enough to know it. I have not slammed any doors. I have simply stopped leaving them open for a man who was measuring my house while he held my hand. Vanessa unblocked nothing and apologized for less. The cost was real, and I will not pretend otherwise. That first Thanksgiving after the hearing, my table was smaller than it had ever been. Some of the cousins did not know what to believe, and decided the easiest thing was to believe nothing and stay home. An empty chair is a quiet kind of grief. It does not make a sound, but you feel it every time you pass it. I set one less place, and I reminded myself of the thing I now know in my bones. A small table of people who see you clearly is worth more than a crowded one that needs you to disappear. But here is the part one hold on to. A month after the hearing, my phone rang on a Sunday, the way it used to. It was Casey, my granddaughter. She was crying. She said her father had told her for a year that Grandma was getting confused, that I didn't really want visitors, that I wouldn't remember her anyway. She had believed him, because why would a daughter not believe her own father? And then she had heard, from a cousin who'd been at that dinner, what really happened. Grandma, she said, I'm so sorry. You were never confused. He just needed everyone to think you were. We talk every Sunday now. She comes by on the first weekend of every month and we work in the garden, and I am teaching her how I fill the pill organizer, 7 days, for compartments, the same way for 9 years, because some careful habits are worth passing down. People ask me if I forgive him. I think they want a clean ending, a hug on a porch, a swelling of music. I don't have that for them. What I have is peace and forgiveness are not the same thing. I made peace with the truth, that my son chose his fear over his mother, and that no amount of my love was going to choose differently for him. I kept my home. The walls Tom and I painted are still mine. The pension he set up to protect me still does. And the mind they all said was failing me turned out to be the one thing in that courtroom that no one could argue with. I was never confused. I just finally started writing it all down. And if you take one thing from an old nurse who learned this the hard way, keep your own records. Keep them dated, keep them plain, keep them where only you can reach them. Not because the people who love you will betray you. Most of them never will. But because the truth, written down in your own hand, is the one inheritance no one can quietly forward to another address.